Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming here tonight. You know what the purpose of the hearing is. We're going to discuss a stated purpose for the Elizabeth Georgiani Trust Fund. Before we get into that, however, the trustees of the trust fund have a presentation about what they do, how they do it, and what we can expect from this trust fund.
Hi folks, I'm Eric Platt. I live at 223 South Main Street. Some of you know me. I've been a select board member in the past, and I've been lucky to be on the trustees of trust funds now for getting on a while. So the trustees of trust funds has had some stellar names associated in the past, who've done some fantastic things for the town. And we won't go into all that detail, but one of the things we're going to do is show you one example of one of the trusts that we manage on behalf of the library and some of the successes transpired over the years so that you can get a sense of what the trustees can do with the Georgiani Fund, and that can be part of the decision making that you look at as you think about, what you think this meeting should be. And that's really, at the end of the night, that's what we're here for, is to hear from you. But we want to give you a quick little presentation before we get going so that you have a sense of what we do and how it works. So just go to the next slide. But before I get into the mechanics of some of the things that we do, I just want to spend 2 seconds and just tell you what happened. And what happened was I had a conversation with the Attorney General's office, and I discovered that the vote from the town last year to take this money and put it into an expendable trust is not a workable plan. And the reason is because trusts are the automatic result of donor gifts. So when someone gives the town a gift like that, it's automatically a trust. And expendable trust funds or capital reserve funds, those are taxation money. Those are raised in taxation. They're raised and appropriated, and then they're put into those funds for a particular purpose. But when the town receives a gift, it's automatically a trust. It's automatically administered by the trustee of trust funds. So whatever bumps we have along the way, we need to just kind of get on with this part of it, which is it was always a trust, and that is why it's with the trustees. Now, in this particular case, it's important to know that trusts, when they're formed, in other words, when they're given, they can only be limited in their purpose by the original donor. And that didn't happen. There was no stated purpose by the donor, Elizabeth Georgiani. There was a letter. The letter came from the executors. The letter implied that they would think, that she would think that it could be used for recreation purposes. However, the Attorney General, now this is not me saying this, so I'm just going to quote what she said, can only be restricted by the donor. The Georgiani Trust, according to the Attorney General's office, is an unrestricted trust. That means it can be used for anything that the town has as a purpose. Okay. So what the New Hampshire Attorney General suggested, which I relayed to the trustees of the trust funds and also the select board, is that the Troy residents get together and tell the select board, what do you think should be the end result of how this money is used? So before we get to what you think, and you provide those examples, we'd like to show you what we do with one of the trusts that we have under management for the library. So if you could go forward with one. So this is a library trust example. It goes back to year probably 2005 up through yesterday. And there's 2 things to notice. One is it's getting bigger. There's also a distribution every year. So why is this important that there's a distribution? Because this money from this trust is what the library uses for its books, periodicals, and town has to make a small donation or put it in their operating budget, a small amount. And it's smaller because they can rely on this money that comes from this trust or a series of trusts. Does that make sense? So every year there's a distribution, and that distribution changes because the market goes up and down, right? And at the end of the year, there was a total that was in that trust. It was a little higher, and then it went down, so you can see how it kind of is doing this. And it's doing that on a day-to-day basis, right? But at the end of the year, our snapshot is December 31st. And these were the totals, 169, 184, back down 181, 170. Great Recession was going on in there. Coming back up, 181 by 2011, 2012, 13 getting stronger, going back a little bit, 14. Now it's up to 205, 625, when you can see this. But the key there is that the distribution was pretty close, right? 8,000, 9,000. One year was 5,600. That was not such a good year. But the key was when we first started with this, the distribution was
either zero or huge.
either zero or huge. So zero was kind of a bad year for the library, right? That wasn't a good thing. No growth for the funds. And so what we've done is we've said, well, let's make a sizable distribution every single year. And this, even though the fund value is rising and falling with the market, it has a distribution. And the 1 in 15 was pretty good. But the last 1, 2, 3, 4 years, it's been pretty significant. When we first started, before 2005, it was lower, like in the 6,000. So it's grown and the distribution has grown. So let's go to the next slide and we'll just talk about that. Wait, before you do, let's go back real quick. So trust total is as of December 31st. That's in town report. That's the MS 9 and 10. You'll find that in every town report. It's usually between 2 pages. The distribution is calculated sometime in January because we've got to get past December 31st. We've distributed $105,242 over the last 12 years to the library, and they've used it to buy books and periodicals and so on. Ed was very nice when he put these numbers together for us to note distributions are growing, and so is the fund. Go to the next slide. So in this example, which is just a generic example, we examined some of the fundamentals or the mechanics behind how does this work. And this example is an example from an insurance firm. So if we have a principal of 100,000, we can expect an annual return on that through investment of around $6,000. So when we calculate our distribution, we're going to, that's 6% by the way. So when we do our payout of the distribution, we're doing it based on 4%, and then the other 2% is going back into the principal. So next year, the principal is growing to 101,760. So we've grown the principal a little bit, and we've had money coming out going towards some project or some program in the town. Make sense so far? Any questions about that? None? Go back one slide. So in this particular case, these distributions are based on that same model. These distributions also meant that there was some money that came out of revenue, meaning that was income that was built up over the year that went back into, so when you go from 12 to 13, some of that, there's a little bit of that distribution going in to grow that fund. That's part of how that fund grows, or that is the way the fund grows. So what you're seeing there is 4%, or whatever the percentage is for this distribution, but there's another portion of that that you don't see in this slide, which is going back to the principal. That's why it's growing. Is that pretty clear now? Okay, go forward to a slide. And then, so this is, again, the same explanation. Some of it stays with the fund, grows the fund. Some of it goes to go to work for the people of Troy by becoming part of a program or part of the operating budget or part of a department's operating budget. So we'll go forward one. So I don't know if we want to get too technical, but this is the summary. insurance company's operating principal, the average investment growth is 6%. We've seen a lot more in some years, and we've seen a lot less. And again, sometimes it's waxing and waning. So bear in mind, I'll talk about that in just a second. 2% difference goes to the insurance company operating expenses. That's in this particular insurance company example, right? But the key is 4% is going out to the recipient, and 2% is being retained for growth. That make sense? So we'll go to the next slide. We're going to make a recommendation here that if it's up to the trustees, what we'd like to do is do the same thing with this fund as we're doing with the library fund. It's just about 5 times bigger, right? Or maybe 4.5 times bigger. So when you get to the distribution significantly larger, right? And so now the question becomes, what does the town want to do with that money? So there's a couple of things, and let's go back to that first slide when I talked about the fact that it's unrestricted. Unrestricted means that if somebody has a desire to see some big project undertaken with this money, they can go get a petition warrant article going, get 25 signatures, turn it into the board, and it'll go to town meeting for a vote. And this model doesn't work in that type of environment. The way this model works is if we have no real threat to the principal, and if we decide that we want to spend 100,000, 240,000, 50,000 here or 50,000 there, what happens? Boom, 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 right? It comes down. So our distribution capability to generate those funds also diminishes. But here's another thing to think about. In order for us to take a distribution out the way you saw on the slide for the library, every year that money has to stay in and be invested. And it has to earn that income regardless of how the actual trust itself waxes or wanes. In other words, that money, when it's in there, you saw it was 169, it went to 181, then it dropped down to 170, back up to 180, down to, up to 190, back down to 180. So at any point in the year, it's doing that. At any given day, it's doing that, right? So what happens when someone says, oh, we voted, we're going to go spend $100,000, what do we have to do? We have to go sell off whatever we're in, regardless of whether or not it's at the high, which means we could be selling it when we're losing. So we're losing, we're coming down twice as fast in that particular situation. And then it's not there to create that disbursement. So what the trustees are saying is, if we had our druthers, we'd say, hey, Town of Troy, the library fund works really well, and it's proving the model. Even though the economy can be all over the map, we can see long-term trend growing the money and making money available for projects and programs in the town. Again, if you go back and you decide you're going to do a big project, then it's hard for us to invest that money because we have to make it available. So what's the most liquid that it can be? Cash in the bank. It just sits there. What type of interest are you making on your checking account now? Right? None of us. No matter how smart we are or how good we are with this, not one of us, maybe Ed. No, not even Ed. So if we keep it super liquid so we make it available for that vote, guess what? No distribution. If we put it in a CD, which some places you can do, you're going to get 1%. We could put it in an online savings account, maybe Barclays for 1.05. I saw that the Service Credit Union has a 30-month CD for 2.05. If you haven't seen that, you should go take a look at their website, because 2.05 today is pretty amazing, right? Right? But it's definitely not 6%, and it's not going to do a lot. And so the problem there is if we have to keep it liquid, that means we're not really getting anything out of this over the long term for the time value of money that it represents. Could I have said that any better? No. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on that part? Should I let you go to that, or should I have one more closing statement? You good? If we have to make it liquid, that means we don't really invest it. That means the money's just gonna sit there until it gets used, and then eventually, not so much is gonna be gone. But what we're seeing is there are other things that we can do where we could have money made available. Now here's the key point. Once we get done with the mechanics of this, we're not so interested in laying claim or staking a claim on what happens at town meeting, right? We're interested in the mechanics. That's the trustees. We're all pretty much in agreement on that. If you guys want to see this go to capital reserve funds to offset highway paving, or you wanted to buy fire trucks, or you want to do whatever it is, that stuff, you can have the select board use that. If you want the select board to take that money and earmark it and put it towards specific programs or specific departments, you tell them that. What we want to do is make this money available every year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aaron. Two things I forgot to mention when we started. One, this meeting is being recorded, and it'll be available on the town website, hopefully by tomorrow afternoon, for the listening pleasure of all. Also, you may notice that Selectman Curtis Hopkins is not in the room tonight. He is on military duty at Fort Hood, Texas, but he's on speakerphone right here, so he's listening to every word. Hello, Curtis.
Hello.
You here? He's here. Okay, before we get underway with the mechanics of the hearing, I want to go over some ground rules. First, since we are recording this, if you have a question or comment, if you're not sitting right in front, please come up so that we can pick you up both on the recorders and on the phone. Second, if you have a question or comment, please tell us your name. Even though we know most of you, Alyssa's over here taking minutes. She may not know your name. If you're sitting farther back, she may not even see you. We also have a gentleman here tonight from the Sentinel who was writing an article, and he doesn't know anybody in this room. So come forward, state your name before you make your comment or ask your question. Third, all questions and comments should be on topic. Now, the topic for this hearing is choosing a stated purpose for the Giorgiani Trust Fund. So if you have a comment or a question that is not directly related to that stated topic, please say it for another time. Any questions before we get underway? Okay, Bob Norton is over here on the laptop. He's going to be taking some notes, and anything that we discuss, any suggestions we come up with, he's going to put them up here so that we can see them while we're discussing. So, anybody want to start? Anybody want to make a suggestion as to a stated purpose of the Giorgiani Trust Fund? Well, that was a fast hearing. All right, well, let me throw one out there. Right with you. How about using the income from the trust fund for maintenance of town buildings? Maintenance of town buildings. That doesn't mean I think it's the best use of it. I just want to get this thing rolling. Okay, anybody have any comments on this suggestion? Bill?
No, I
Herb, you had your hand up.
I did. I was going to suggest.
Herb Drug.
I was going to suggest the amount that's dispersed every year, putting that into our capital reserve funds in whatever proportion that it needs to be to fund those funds. The budget committee is working on a capital improvements plan, which probably should be, I don't know, at the end of next year.
Yeah, it'll be 2019 it would go into.
Effect.
Yep, if everything goes correctly, that's when it would we'd begin funding that.
So there'll be a real good plan as to how much money needs to be generated every year to fund all the capital reserve accounts for every department.
So we would attempt to fund the capital reserve funds with the income generated by the trust fund before going to taxation.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And you could do it proportionately. You know, the fire department certainly has a bigger capital reserve requirement than, you know, maybe some of the other departments. So he could do it proportionately, and then it would be the same, it would be consistent every year. Nobody would ever wonder what it's gonna be for, or where it was gonna go. It wouldn't have to be any discussion, it would automatically go to those funds, and that would save us having to raise it at town meeting through taxation.
Okay, thank you. Any comments on what Kurt has said, Bill?
Not a comment.
Oh,
Got my own comment.
I'm sorry.
I don't have a comment on what he said. I have my own comment.
Okay, would you come forward and give us your name?
I'm William Cavino, 255 Monadnock Street. Have you guys thought about taking a chunk of, I understand what you're doing, and that's great, but have you thought about taking a chunk of money and buying solar arrays for the town? The typical return on investment for solar arrays is 4 to 6%, which is in the same ballpark you're in. They last, projected life is 50 years. The town would reduce its electric bill. You're not going to get it to zero in its current environment laws, but you can reduce it significantly. And then you don't have to worry about the market going up and going down. You're going to get that same return on investment every single month. And it starts paying off as soon as you turn it on. And the electric bills, as they go up, because they're going to go up, we know they're going to go up, then your return on investment goes up. I put a solar array on my house and I'm getting over 6% return. And now that would require, depending upon what you wanted to do, the best way to do it would be a distributed system where you put the arrays on the buildings that they supply. There's a whole bunch of, like you say, mechanics and all this sort of stuff. But you could spend $100,000 and do part of the town, or you could spend $200,000 or $250,000 and wipe out the electric bill for the whole town.
When you say wipe out the electric bill for the whole town, you're
Oh.
talking about town buildings, right?
Yeah.
You're not talking about
Not the people,
residents.
not the people, not the residents, no.
So you have to follow here for a minute.
But yeah, that'd be great, but no. For the town, you can get our electric bill down to a very small number. Because there's a service connection fee. You never get to zero.
Thank you. Would anybody like to comment on that, on Bill's suggestions?
Or ask a question.
Comments or questions on anything that Bill just said? Comments or questions on anything that Herb said on the capital reserve funds?
Hey, Alan.
Yeah, Curtis?
The people that are away from the phone,
Yes.
I go and look at that, and it's really hard to hear.
Okay, well, we've got them up within about 10 feet.
Okay.
I'm going to move, I'll move this forward. Curtis is having trouble hearing, so it's really important that you come up close. Okay, any comments or questions about my suggestion about using the income to repair town buildings? Okay, any new suggestions, comments or questions? Hi.
I'm gonna make it,
Pat, wait till you get up front here.
I'm gonna make it difficult on everybody to hear. I'm looking at some
First
of
tell
this-
us your name.
Oh, sorry, Pat Wright. I'm looking at the suggestions and I see the rationalization to those things, but I'm wondering if this fund couldn't be used to foster new growth in town. Whether to fund an internship for someone to work on the website or work on marketing, or to create a scholarship for someone so that we bring in a little new activity and do it that way. Or even to fund a micro business loan if someone wanted to do something in town. Doesn't have to be a big amount, but just something that generates something new.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments on Pat's suggestion? Okay, any questions or comments on anything we've discussed so far? Any questions or comments on anything new? If there aren't, we're going to wrap it up.
I have one more comment.
Sure.
I think whatever we do, and I think there are obviously some good ideas, or a lot of good ideas out there. The administration of any of these ideas probably should be thought about too, because the select board, you guys have a lot on your plate. So to have it be something that you don't have to think about, you don't have to worry about, you don't have to, every year it's not an issue that you have to go through, you know, you have a whole bunch of extra things to do to try to figure out where this money's gonna go.
Well, I'm not sure we would. If we come up with a stated purpose, then at our next town meeting, that's established.
Right, as long as it's consistent and it's the same all the time. If it's for something that changes, if it's for something that changes year to year, or,
To change it year to year would require a warrant article and a vote at town meeting. So I think whatever we put on there, at the most, it's going to change once a year, and that's highly unlikely, I think.
yeah, I don't think it will.
Yeah. All right, let me just do a quick poll. There's no voting at a public hearing. It's just information exchange, but that doesn't mean we can't take an informal poll. Everybody, okay, Stuart? When you get up front here and state your name.
Stuart Harris. Good evening. If this is a trust, does it have to be treated as a trust, or can it be, and I don't know terms, so we keep calling it the Georgiana Trust, but then we're getting requests to pull big chunks away. By definition, is a trust fund principal that's held and just proceeds are distributed? Or can it just be distributed, you know, 100,000 here, 100,000 there? That's
My understanding is it could be done either way. Is that correct?
Let me answer the question.
Yes, please, Aaron.
So, when I talked to the Attorney General, they said that because there's two things in here. One, what makes it a trust was that there was donor intent. Okay, so that was their litmus test to determine that this should be a trust, right? So that's where that's at.
Right.
But then the next aspect to the trust was, did they specify what the town should do with it, or what it should be used for? And while there's a letter that says that it should be used for, that possibly she would like it to be used for recreation purposes, it didn't actually come from Elizabeth Georgiana. So therefore, from the Attorney General's point of view to us, they said, if you really want to stand up in court if you had to wage a battle over that, you don't really have a leg to stand on to say that it can only be used for recreation. So she said, it's unrestricted. Okay, that's what the Attorney General said. And when you talk about it being unrestricted, it really means what you just said, which was people can ask for it to be dispersed in big chunks versus grown and have disbursements out of income.
Right.
They can actually use the principal.
So it can be done that way, or it can be pieced out.
It can be done where the principal can be drained right down to nothing. And so that's one of the reasons why the Attorney General suggested to the trustees that we ask the select board to bring the townsfolk in to talk about this, because we really can't invest it for the long term to make a disbursement and grow it over time. If we're going to be always worried that, well, we have to keep it liquid because we might have some warrant article that comes along that says we want to spend a couple $100,000 on it. So we wouldn't be able to invest all of it. We would maybe only invest a portion of it. We wouldn't get the disbursement. That wouldn't be quite as exciting or, you know, as nice. There will be years if we do it the way that the trustees are recommending, where the disbursement's bigger and sometimes it's smaller. And we have to know that in advance, otherwise we don't want to have buyer's remorse. We don't, you know, it's working in other areas. And yes, you saw a year with the library got $5,500, and I can assure you that was cause for concern that year, but then it rebounded the following year after that, and it kept on despite the recession. So those kinds of things are the metrics and the mechanics behind how this is working for our trust today. And if we go forward, what we're looking for is you all to tell us, you know, do you really want to see option one? In which case, our recommendation works. Do you want to see option two? Because our recommendation works for that.
Right.
Do you want to see 3? That's solar arrays. That doesn't work for them. And that means we probably don't get a disbursement, and we have to keep it liquid because that's expensive. That's not to say that this gentleman's idea is not a good idea. It's simply, it's a different use of the fund. Number 4 could be used with our recommendation.
So, I guess before I sit down, one of the thing that I would have up there is that we really need to make the decision which path we're gonna follow. I don't think we can do it halfway.
Very happy to hear
Say, I'm sorry. I think that one of the things that we have to decide basically is which path we're gonna follow. Are we gonna split it up into chunks? Or are we gonna count on its income coming in every year and hold that saving? And personally, I would vote for holding the money. That's 23,000 plus or minus less that we have to come up with in our taxes. So.
Thank you, Stuart.
Yeah.
Any comments or questions on anything that Stuart just said? Anybody else have any?
I have one
Ed?
comment.
Yeah.
My name is Ed Oakes, and I live at 428 Richmond Road. The only comment that I wanted to add to what Aaron said was, he said it wouldn't work for option number 3. Well, it could work. What you do is you take out a loan to buy the solar arrays, and you use the funds every year to pay off the principal and interest on the loan. I've used this strategy for my investment clients. I've used it for both people who, where it typically comes into play, for example, if somebody inherits some money and they also have some college loans to pay off, or they have a mortgage to pay off, people are very tempted to take that inheritance and just pay it off, but then the money's gone. So what I try and do is have them implement this strategy so that when they're done paying off the loan, they still have a chunk of money left. So it never goes away. So that's where this all comes from.
Bill?
Phil Covino again. There is a thing where a third-party investor pays to install the system. Your electric bill goes down a little bit for a period of 6 years. They get the tax credit, because there's a, if you as individuals put in a solar array, you get a 30% tax credit. So if you put in a $20,000 system, you get $6,000 in tax credit the following March, April, whatever. But they get the tax credit, so they get a return on their investment, and then after 6 years, you buy the system from them at a lower rate than if you had bought it yourself. So there's a variety of different mechanisms to do this. And once you've done it, be it $200,000 now or $100,000 6 years from now or something, the electric bill, which is what, $25,000 a year? What's the electric bill for the town?
It's all broken up between all the different departments.
Let's just say that the town's electric bills, then you're going to get the same thing as your return on investment, whatever 6% is. You're going to get that money. You're not going to be spending that money, so you're saving tax dollars. You're not getting it from the trust, you're getting it from the solar array. So the town is still going to get the money because you're not going to be paying that money for electric. And
We could take the disbursement and pay the electric bill. And that,
yeah. But if the market tanks, the disbursement goes down. Whereas if you put in the solar array, your return on investment keeps going up every year that the electric rates go up. One last comment. If anybody wants to talk about personal solar arrays, contact me, and I'm glad to show you mine and what I did and some of that sort of stuff.
Thank you, Bill. Hi.
I'd like
Could you,
Mr. Covino, my name is Joan Dion, and I'd like Mr. Covino to give us an estimate on how much these solar panels will cost. And secondly, President Trump is going to do away with that $6,000 tax credit, I assure you.
Well, that's one of the reasons why we would want to do it now, and by now I mean before that tax code gets changed. But there's a variety of different ways to do it for the town. And that would take some research and this, we'd have to put together a committee and we'd have to have people look into the different things and have to get some quotes from different vendors for what the town really needs. Like I say, there's a variety of different ways to do it, and that would have to be investigated before we could give you a definitive dollar amount.
I'm assuming it's at least 100,000.
Oh, at least 100,000.
200?
Could be $250,000 to do the whole town, but the town could decide just to do some of its buildings. There's one way to do it, which is to have a central array like at the Reclamation Center. Use that bill up there as doing nothing. Put a big array up there, and that would generate all of the town buildings' needs. However, that's not the best return because of the current laws. It's best to have it being generated on the building that uses it. Because this, at the end of the year, if we've got any surplus out there, the electric company will buy it at 3 cents on a kilowatt hour, and you're paying 15, 16 cents on a kilowatt hour now. So the idea is to size the system to meet your needs with maybe a little bit of growth built into it, and distribute it, or we could use a different, there's a variety of different financing mechanisms.
I'd like to just give you a personal experience that I had with solar, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. So I wanted to look at solar, right, because like this gentleman, I thought, wow, that's awesome. And so talked to a bunch of consultants, and one of the first things that they said was, reduce your consumption.
Yeah.
Right? So you figure it out, reduce your consumption so that when you buy a system, you're not having to stretch, which is difficult. And it's easier to do in a private home than it is with public buildings, right? So what happened after I reduced my consumption? First I took stock of everything in the house and I made a variety of changes. Energy saving devices. I changed over the washer and the dryer. The dryer, which was left by the previous tenant, was 6,500 watts an hour, 6.5 kilowatts an hour. There was a giant sucking sound when that thing came on, because it was trying to draw the moon out of the sky. It was like a giant magnet. And when I finally looked at the little, the decal on it, and I said, 6,500 watts, wow. And then it hit me, I was shocked. I was like, I had a heart attack. So I wrestled that thing out of the house myself, by myself. It was this tall. It had this much space on either side of the closet that it was in. And I got it out on the deck, and I heaved it over the side, and I said, okay, done with that. And one of the funny things that happened was my electric bill ended up being $30 a month. And then I was looking at, instead of putting a $24,000 system in, I was looking at an $8,000 system. And I thought, that's great. And then I did the math on how long it would take for $30 a month to get paid back. Because what I learned was it's one of the places where you can do the most for the environment, your home, not your car, the home. And I started paying $30 a month, and I said, well, that's that, because there's no way I was putting in solar, because it was going to be 25, it was going to be longer than the lifespan of the equipment to pay that back. And that's me in a private home with pretty small needs. It's not a public building where you don't know people coming and going, kids coming and going. It's a very different thing. But just throw that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Any other questions or comments on anything we've covered tonight or anything new? Yeah, Marcia?
I'm Marcia Nato, 123 High Street. I have a question. When we first started discussing this with you, you want to do the investing, correct? But you aren't by law allowed to do anything about how we're going to spend this money. Is that correct? Was it something I thought we talked about was having a committee that was going to be in charge of how things would be handled? Didn't we discuss a committee that you're going to have certain people on a committee decide how it can be spent. You didn't want that, you didn't want anything to do with that, or you're not?
Can I try?
Sure,
I'll try.
okay.
Okay, so the town, back when it was voting to put it into an expendable trust, and that turned out to be not workable.
Yeah.
The town also talked about whether or not the select board should be agents to expend. So the technical language that you're looking for is agents to expend.
Okay,
And so the town voted to have the trustees of trust funds be the agents to expend.
right.
So the problem with that is that in your, both in the RSAs and in town, where it comes to finances, you want separation of duties. The people who are managing the money shouldn't be the ones who are writing the checks. So the attorney, so this is a little complicated, but at the end of town meeting, that vote gets sent up to the Department of Revenue. And they look at all the warrant articles and the operating budget and everything the town voted on, and they decide whether or not it meets the letter of the law. And they flagged the warrant article associated with the Giorgiani Trust because there were some of those issues that I talked about. And one of the issues was with the agents to expend. So we're here to manage that money. We're not here to tell you what to do with the money. We're just here to meet once a month to review the trust, to look at the investment policy, to talk to Ed about things that he sees in the market, to try to gauge where we are. But we're not here to go to the select board and say, here's what we want you to do with this money. That's not the purpose of the board in any of these situations. So the way the library works is the money gets dispersed and it goes to the library, and the library director and the trustees of the library are responsible for how that money gets spent. So this is very similar. I don't think we ever said that we wanted to tell the select board what they should be doing with the money. We were just trying to help out with what are the mechanics behind the scenes with the different ones.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. I don't believe after what's transpired that we should leave it up to the selectmen to be in charge of that.
It isn't.
It isn't.
It's not.
There are no agents to expend.
Okay.
Townspeople are agents to expend.
Okay.
Has to be voted on at town meeting.
So then we come up with the ideas, we go to them, and then they put the articles before.
Well,
There's two ways that can happen. One is the select board can put together a warrant article and bring it to town meeting, like we do with 20 other warrant articles. The other way is that any citizen can make a petition with 25 signatures of registered voters and bring that in to the selectman's office, and that warrant article will also appear on the warrant at town meeting. So if you decide that you want to use that money to build a swimming pool, you put together a warrant article, get 25 people to sign it, that will be voted on at town meeting.
Can I address one more
Sure.
aspect of this? So the key is for residents of the town of Troy to have a common understanding about how this money will be used. Because to your point, there are no agents to expend, and that was decided by the DRA according to the way that it got voted on, and they read the minutes and it didn't pass muster, so there are no agents to expend. The agents are the legislative body at town meeting, that's the voters. So it has to be a warrant article that gets brought to town meeting for it to be voted on. But to your point, there's an interesting wrinkle in all that, which is Alan's not going to be the select board person forever. I can tell you that for certain. That's my little humor. But, so,
I got it.
you get it. So here's the thing. Somebody could come in and they might have all kinds of ideas. And the select board could show up with this article that they think is, the most whiz-bang thing ever. This has to happen. And they bring it to town meeting, and town meeting has to then decide. Somebody could come in and talk to the select board until they're blue in the face, until they finally say, okay, we give up. We'll put it on a warrant article and bring it to town meeting, right? Those are things that, no offense to Alan and the select board, who are all hardworking, really dedicated people, but that's in the future sometime. So the key to this is, you want this to go out there for a long period of time, whether it ends up building solar array and we pay it off a little time, or whatever it is. I mean, I'm glad Ed was here to correct that miscommunication on my part. But if we have a common understanding amongst the townspeople of what this is going to be used for, which is your purpose here, I heard you. Then we can all go to town meeting and say, well, that's not what, we're not here for that, you know, vote it down.
Okay. I have one more question for you, Dennis. You brought it up earlier. I hope I'll keep you busy. You referred to that letter that said the money should go towards the children of the town. And you're saying that, who did that letter come from? Maybe that's what I
That
want
was
to
the
know.
executors of the trust.
Maybe
The state of New Hampshire gave us either a recommendation that that is something that could be used for. I have it here.
But it's from the original letter was from the executors of the trust.
But that letter is just a suggestion.
Right,
Right.
that's all it
It
is.
has nothing, you know, Mrs. Giorgiani, in her will, just said to the town of Troy.
Okay, so who arbitrarily said, oh, well, she wanted it to come for the children? I mean, who came up with this idea?
The executors of the trust wrote a letter to the select board,
Executives of the will.
of the will, sorry, the will. I'm sorry, yeah, that's wrong.
So I spoke to the executrix of the will, and Giorgiani's niece, estranged niece, demanded that the money be used for education, for youth education,
Okay.
where she had no business to be demanding such things. Becky, the executrix, wrote the letter trying to appease her, but it wasn't legally binding in any way. It wasn't what was in the will itself.
And if it goes to education, that means it goes to the school district.
Oh, please no.
And if that happens, I can guarantee you, even if we were to stipulate that the money be used at Troy School, if we did that, the school district is just going to chop the budget for Troy School, saying, oh, they've got that covered. So you might as well just give that money away. Do that.
Yeah, that's why I just had to refinance my home just to keep it over my head. No, okay,
George, would you come forward so we can get you on the
I
floor?
want to see it.
George Mello, first of all, I'd like to clarify that it does not say education. It's youth and recreation. Mrs. Giorgiani was a friend of my mother's, grew up with my mother. She dedicated her life to children. She was a gym teacher, athletic director, and I would just urge everyone here to take a look at that cover letter before you make any decisions on how to spend that money, because besides the legal aspects we keep hearing about, there's a moral aspect here. And you have to actually read that, and I'm sure somebody here has copies they can get right here.
I've got it right here, I'll read it.
If you could, please.
It's from the Elizabeth C. Giorgiani Trust. The next line says Becky Etten, 3830 Cashel Boulevard, Reno, Nevada. It's dated August 2nd, 2016, to the town of Troy. I am happy to inform you that the inheritance process has been successfully completed and the will of Elizabeth C. Giorgiani is now ready to put into action. Excuse me. According to the will, I am enclosing a check in the amount of $821,500 as the bequest left by Elizabeth C. Giorgiani to you. The estate would like to see the monies allocated to youth and recreation. In case you have any kind of questions regarding the inheritance, please feel free to contact me. I really appreciate your patience during this process. I would be grateful if you would countersign and return the enclosed copy of this letter to acknowledge the safe receipt of the check. All right, so it was youth and recreation, but that is coming from Becky Etten, not from Elizabeth Giorgiani. Hang on. One at a time. Marcia?
Who signed off on that? Whose signature's on that?
Becky Etten. She was the...
No. You look at it again, there should be a signature of a previous selectman on there that signed off on that.
I'm sorry, that was it? Tom Metzen. That just means that he acknowledged receipt of the letter and sent a copy
He
back to her.
acknowledged receipt of that letter and
Yeah.
turned around and half of it was spent.
Well, number one, it wasn't half, but that is off topic. The letter here from Becky Etten has no say in what the town of Troy does with that money. Okay. Ben?
So I spoke to Becky Etten. She was a close friend and neighbor of Ms. Giorgiani, and she said to me specifically that she helped her administer the estate through their attorney, and the attorney spoke to Giorgiani and said, you need to lay out some sort of purpose for this money. And she was adamant in not laying out a specific purpose. The town should decide. That's what Becky Etten told me, and I spoke to her personally on the phone.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Lynn?
Alan, hi, Lynn Smith. Before we try to state a purpose, does somebody have to decide how the trust is going to be used? If it's going to be allowed to be spent in big chunks, or if it's going to be put in a long-term investment and only the proceeds, the income be used?
I think it's the other way around. We need to state a purpose first, and the purpose will tell us how we want to invest the money.
Not necessarily. We're not necessarily in agreement with that.
I can't hear you.
We're not necessarily in agreement with that statement.
Okay.
Ed and I just came to the same conclusion. We have similar brain waves. He's the smarter one. I'm the good-looking one. We could do it. We could choose one of those two paths and then go on from there. And that would be a little bit better because, to Ed's point, which I hadn't really thought about, if you wanted to do a big project, you would just put the trust at it, and it would, you would keep the principal earning the income.
Yep.
So that might, if people are generally certain that that's the thing to do, you should all say so.
And then does that get like set in stone? I mean, if the town or whoever says the majority wants to invest it and use the income, does that go on in perpetuity, or can somebody come up and say, oh no, I need $100,000 for blah, blah, blah?
The latter. So yes to the second half of that.
Okay.
So the idea was to have a common understanding, and the Attorney General, the Assistant Attorney General, who's in charge of charitable trust, who made this recommendation that we all get together and make this decision so that when we all go to town meeting, we have a common understanding of how this is supposed to be. So if everyone is in general agreement that we want to create income every year, then we should know that so that when something shows up on the warrant article that's going to cannibalize that income or that principle, we all know what to do.
All right.
Say no.
Yeah, well, my opinion is it gets invested long-term and we use the income for one of these stated purposes. And I'm in favor of probably capital reserve first and repair of town buildings second.
Can we add that as number 5 for your polling that you're going to do at the end of this?
Well, the polling will be for whatever is up there. So what is your number 5?
Protect the principal.
Protect the principal, okay?
Yep. Yep, so
But I think,
that was,
yeah,
I mean,
I think
it's not a
that
foregone
protect the
conclusion
principal,
at this point.
I think that would fit with any of the others.
Well, I
Except
understand
maybe-
that, but I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that our goal is to, I mean, repair town buildings with, we could use a big chunk of it to repair town buildings all at once.
Right, but
I think we
my
just need to be
suggestion
clear.
though, when I said that, I said, use the revenue from it.
Yeah,
I just didn't make it up there.
Yeah.
Are you gonna poll?
Yes.
I think you were gonna poll.
Oh, yeah.
That's probably a good
But I want to do
idea
that,
to do right about now.
but I want to do it last, okay? I don't want to do a poll and then have another suggestion come up.
Okay.
All right, George.
Yeah, I just have a crazy idea. Why don't we keep that money where it is, invest it heavily, try to get that money back, and then if something comes up, we put it in a warrant article, let the town vote on where to spend that money.
Okay.
Because 100 different people can come up with 100 different ways to spend that money. Leave it where it is, let it generate some interest, and let's try to get that money back up. And, if a worthy cause comes forward, the town will vote for it.
Okay, so just don't touch it.
Yeah, leave it there, let it get its interest and, yeah, invest it heavily. I have all the faith in the world in Ed. He's on top of it if he's investing it, so.
So to expand on that thought, if something does come to town meeting and we vote it down, whether it's for the disbursement or some portion of the fund, let's say it's a disbursement amount that the trustees identify at the end of the year that, yeah, this is available based on the plan that you're recommending, and we vote that down, does that get put back into the principal for further investment, or what happens to that $23,000?
It never leaves the principal.
Okay, so you just, this is available for disbursement. If we vote it down, then it just doesn't get dispersed. Okay, thank you.
Got one other quick question. What time frame for if this gets invested, what's the time frame for, I'm assuming that it would be 2019 would be the first disbursement?
That would be the best way to do it.
So you want to sit on it for a year and kind of let it settle out? Okay, I was just curious.
Because it's been kind of in limbo for 9
Yeah.
months, a year.
Bill?
Question, if you have this money in this fund that you administer, is there what I'm concerned about is that, 3 years from now, somebody comes and says, I want $100,000 at the town meeting and it's on a warrant. Is there any way to legally put it into something bound so that somebody can't rob it later?
That's why we're here.
No, that's the problem.
That's the problem.
Could at the town meeting, could we vote that to happen?
We could always vote to undo it. That's the problem.
You can't obligate a future town meeting.
Yeah.
Can't. Okay.
Except for like a bond or something like that. Janet, did you have something?
Well, I was just going to say that the article should state.
We can't hear you, Janet. Could you come forward?
We should state that at
And
town
you're
meeting.
Janet McCullough, town treasurer.
Yes, we should state at the meeting that the principal be locked in, that you have right now that you're holding, and then only the income can be spent, and then the income we should state in the article that the income will be voted on every year, how you spend it. Unless you want to set a set purpose now, but I believe that's what it should be.
You certainly can.
And the
I
most
think it would
important
be,
thing to be done.
it would be advisory only, I guess.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be binding, but.
It would be nice to have it on record, certainly, because then, for future generations that are looking at this thing, want to spend it all, they would have some.
Right. So,
Back to it.
lock in the principal, lock in that principal that he has right
So
now.
you're saying put it on a warrant, as a warrant article?
Put it on a warrant article,
Worded
just
exactly
lock
that
your
way.
principal in, and that only income could be spent, and by the vote of town meeting.
So that needs to say, put it in a warrant article for town meeting.
All right. And Janet, just to clarify that, are you suggesting that whatever, if we leave money in there, let's say that there's $50,000 income, and we disperse 30 and keep 20. Now we have a new principal. We can't go below that again, right? You know what I'm saying?
I'm sorry.
Well, I think probably it was handled like the perpetual care, where the principal is locked in and you do make money on it, but then you also earn income every year, and that income is just sitting there right now, and do it on the similar thing as the perpetual care.
We can do a quick sidebar on the perpetual care. So, and we didn't use the perpetual care as an example because the library makes a little bit more sense because we've had a disbursement going out every year. Troy is lucky to have a very significant perpetual care fund for the cemeteries. We have $2.1 million. $2.1 million. The difficult thing for us is, and it's growing, right? It's growing just like that library fund, but what you can do with it is, there's only, it's by law, you can only use it for perpetual care of those plots that bought perpetual care. So we got $2.1 million in a fund, and that one is very restricted compared to the Georgiana Trust, which is unrestricted. where you have other problems. The perpetual care grew and grew and grew. There were some trustees that did amazing things for the town of Troy back in the day. They grew that particular fund tremendously. And the income in that fund is, I think the principal is $600,000. And the rest of it is sitting there. What do we do now? We put money into an expendable trust, and we use that money to upkeep the, to pay for the upkeep of the cemeteries that we have. It's locked into just those purposes. But it's a tremendous amount of money.
George?
So if we invested it that way, where you only were allowed to spend the interest, wouldn't that really be a perpetual trust?
Well,
And
again,
wouldn't it be set up in that manner?
yeah,
Legal?
well, we want it to be, I don't want to be the spokesperson for everybody out there, you're probably get tired of me, but that's why we're here.
Yeah.
We can't restrict it because the donor didn't do that.
Well,
Well,
how can you
yeah.
say that holds no weight, though?
Well, if we have a common knowledge about what everybody expects this thing to be, then everybody, when they go to town meeting, will do the right thing.
Exactly.
Right.
But I'm just, the point of perpetual trust.
The difficulty will be, George, and you can envision this building burns down.
Yeah?
And people are gonna show up.
We have insurance, right?
We gotta rebuild that building, or maybe, because we let somebody borrow it who didn't have insurance, and now we're on the. Maybe it happens. And that's it.
They're called litigants.
So, it's just a question of, everybody has to be on the same page.
Right, but can we label that a perpetual trust here tonight, and can you go forward with them terms?
Advisory.
In that way, nobody would ever be able to take that principle, or just earn.
I don't know if you could do it and then not undo it. The problem is, you have a town meeting, and things can get reversed.
That's what I'm saying.
I would like to have, of course, a perpetual trust. I think that's a, good memorial to Giorgiani, but, you have to.
Contract's as good as the attorney who writes it.
I wouldn't spend money on it, George. I'll tell you what, George. Everybody at this table really wants to do that.
Yeah.
But we're not doing that because it's gonna cost money and it's not really gonna stand up in court. That's our take. So what we're doing is.
But we shouldn't worry about court.
Huh?
We shouldn't worry about court.
I think what we all want to do is make it as difficult as possible for a future select board, or even a town meeting for that matter, to totally change everything that we decide this coming year.
And that's what the cemetery trust does, that perpetual trust.
Yeah,
Can't touch that.
but I think that's because there are provisions in the law for that, for the cemeteries,
Yes.
which don't apply here.
Because of the way that it was generated.
Yeah. But I don't think that option is available to us to do it the way the cemeteries do it.
I'm getting it. Thank you.
Stuart?
Stuart, so you're saying we all have to be on the same page, or that's the goal. So my question is, what happens tonight and what happens at town meeting? Or decisions aren't made tonight, correct?
That is correct. Here's what will
Does
happen.
anything happen between now and town meeting, or is that the page that we all are talking about, and there will be a decision made at town meeting? So that's the...
Here's what will happen. The last thing we're going to do tonight is just take an informal poll to see what everybody in attendance tonight thinks of these ideas. The select board will take that into consideration in writing a warrant article that will convert the trust from an expendable trust fund to just a, no, we won't do that? Don't even have to do that,
There's
right?
no expendable trust fund.
What's that?
There's no expendable trust fund.
Okay, so we're just going to establish it as a trust fund.
No, it's already a trust fund.
Okay. So what do we have to do? Just state the purpose?
I think Janet had the idea that,
Okay.
that people would vote on a warrant article that says the town of Troy agrees that the way forward for this trust is the following.
Okay.
What did you say, Janet? You said
To lock in the principal,
lock in the principal
and
and
just use the
just use
income.
the income. And that's, to Mr. Drug's point of view, that would be on record.
So let me word it another way then. Okay. The select board will take tonight's suggestions and the informal poll that we're about to do into consideration in writing a warrant article that will do whatever it needs to do for town meeting. And then everybody gets to vote on it. And it'll be publicized in advance as soon as we discuss it. We'll probably wait until first meeting in November, wait till Curtis gets back. But we'll put that in on the town website, on Facebook, and the Troy Town News, so that everybody knows what we're planning to do. And if anybody doesn't like it, you have two options. One is you can come to a select board meeting and argue with us about it, and we'll listen. The other is you can get 25 signatures and put your own warrant article on the agenda for town meeting. Any other questions or comments on anything we've covered tonight? Well, let's do our informal poll. We're just going to go down this list, and if you think it's a good idea, just raise your hand, and we'll just do a quick count. Repair of town buildings. 0. That was an easy count. Place disbursement into capital reserve funds.
What's that again now?
That looks like about 12, 13.
Number 2.
Ask the question again.
All right. No. Let's try that again. Okay. Number 2, place the disbursement, that is the whatever income we spin off of the fund, into a capital reserve fund. Show of hands. About 15. Number 3, buy solar arrays for the town. 1. This is number 4, foster new growth in town. 2. Number 5, protect the principal. Too many to count. Pretty much everybody. Number 6, leave it where it is, invest it, and let the interest grow. Just use the income. Not that many, I expected more. About 15, okay. Number 7, lock the principal in at town meeting. Again, pretty much everyone. So it looks like protect the principal, lock it in at town meeting is pretty much what everybody wants to do. Does anybody want to speak against that? No, good. Okay, anything further before we wrap this up?
How about Curtis?
Curtis, you got anything you want to add?
I know it was really echoey, and I didn't hear everybody, but if anybody mentioned about bringing it up to a certain dollar amount instead of what it is at right now, like say $600,000, and then using that as the protective principle?
We didn't. Let me just throw that out for those who couldn't hear it. And we actually did talk about this briefly at a selectmen's meeting. One idea was to leave the money in there and not take any income from it until we reach principal of a certain dollar amount, like $600,000 or $821,500. Any comments on that?
Not touch the interest.
Right, just leave it in there, don't touch it until it gets to a certain dollar amount.
Absolutely.
Who likes that idea? Quite a few, not as many as number 5 and 7, but really, that suggestion and number 5 and 7 are consistent with each other. So I think I think we can throw that in there, and if anybody doesn't like it, they can come to a meeting and protest. Okay, anything else? Herb?
One last question. So we've decided that we're going to protect, or we've decided that we'd like to protect the principal and just use the interest, based on our list. But what about so there is going to be, or could be a disbursement. What does that get used for? Did we decide that, or do we every year we decide what the disbursement?
That's a good point. We didn't, and that is the stated purpose of this meeting.
I think so.
Yeah, thank you.
We missed a big chunk of this
Yeah.
year.
So at some point, the principal is up where we want it to be. We're locking in the principal, but we're getting some disbursements every year. What are we going to use it for?
Decide that at town meeting.
But we have to put a stated purpose on the trust fund to satisfy the state.
And I don't think we want to have 25 warrant articles every year for $20,000 or $25,000.
No, actually, repair of town buildings, buy solar arrays, foster new growth. Those three are stated purposes. But they didn't do well at the poll.
I think it's a discussion for another day.
Well, we can't really do that because we have to have something
Before town
to satisfy
meeting.
the state.
But how would you satisfy the state? What do you mean?
We have to put a stated purpose on the trust fund.
On
In
the
other words,
trust
it's a trust fund, is for recreation or for maintenance of town buildings.
How about general town purposes?
Yeah.
Can we do that? General town purposes?
Yeah.
That was Bert Lang's suggestion. Bert Lang has suggested that the stated purpose of the fund be for, how did you word it, Bert? General town purposes. Is that too vague? Too vague, Bert. Too vague.
Wait a minute, yeah.
Yes.
So where is this requirement to the state?
I thought you gave that to us.
No.
No.
No, sir. The trust is a trust is a trust, it's automatically a trust, that's what it is.
So we don't have to have a stated purpose.
No, I think it would be nice if, again, we have a common understanding. So, can I just talk about this for a
Sure,
second?
absolutely.
So, Bert, I apologize for running my mouth some more, so you have to bear with me. The first part was great, right? You figured out, oh, okay, the trustee's doing something there, that's pretty neat. So we don't want to screw that up. It sounds like we're all on the same page, right? We want to grow that principle, we want to use the, I guess wherever, we want to use the income only. Right? Now, what do you do with the income? Still unrestricted, right? Still unrestricted.
So we don't have to say what the interest is going to be used for.
No, what could happen is the select board could take that $23,000 or that $22,500 or whatever the number is, and they could put it into a warrant article for a particular purpose that they decide as part of their budget process. Because again, the budget committee, as you know, deals with the operating budget, and the select board deals with the warrant articles. They might have something in a warrant article that they need to fund.
But somebody could even put it in by petition.
They could.
Okay.
And we could put it towards we could put the income towards paying down the bond on the recycling center. You know, so that we didn't have to have tax money coming out of that. We have income coming in from bottles and cans and so on, and that would pay that $1 million down faster. That's an example of something that they could do. They could say, we got to buy a cruiser this year, and we got $5,000 over here, we'll take the 23, we have enough to buy a cruiser. We'll have to vote on it, but that's a way that they could do that. They could put it in the capital reserve funds, and that would lower the tax burden. So tax burden is, at the end of the day, kind of where everybody is going, right?
I just got a question to capital reserves, because capital reserves and expendable plus.
Excuse me, Janet, could you come up here, please?
Well, you're
So
right.
we can get you on the recorder.
You might have got ahead of that. That's just tax money.
Yep.
We may have more time than
Yeah,
that.
I'm not quite sure what the DRI would say on putting it into capital reserve funds. Capital reserve funds have to be funded from taxation. This is not a taxable item. This is money coming in from the trust. So I think they might question the capital reserves or the expendable trust to put money into it. It has to be raised by taxation on those two funds.
Well, we take money out of the perpetual care and we put it into the expendable trust.
Yeah, because it's public.
Well, you have to go, we'll discuss that later, Aaron, but you have to, you're gonna go to probate court to do that, which you can. I mean, the trustees can go to probate court to remove the income, put it down into the expendable trust. Right now, we're charging a percentage of the cemetery to the perpetual care and a percentage down at the general maintenance fund. But we've been through this before. You guys have to go to probate court in order to get all that income that's in there moved down into the expendable trust. But then the town is then responsible to forever pay for the upkeep of the cemeteries, okay?
So you're right, and it's the mechanics of some of this stuff behind the scenes is a little bit involved.
Janet, wouldn't also, if you're gonna try to put it into a capital reserve.
Bert, could you come up here so we can get you on the recorder?
If I'm not mistaken, if you're gonna try to put it into a capital reserve, you would have to earmark every dollar that goes into every different capital reserve. You can't just stick money.
That's what Herb's, that's what Herb's.
Has to be.
Yeah, it would be. That'd be a warrant article outlining every
It'd be,
dollar.
no, you'd have to have a warrant article for each different capital reserve.
You got it.
Well, they're all together, that's what we have now, when we fund capital reserves.
No, they're not together. They're all separated. Every one of them is separate.
There's one
We
article
put
that
it in
covers the,
individually.
yeah, but there's
Well,
one article.
that one actually might take some research by the select board with either the DRA or the legal.
But even if we had to do it that way, that's just an extra 5 minutes of work.
Be a nightmare.
So,
Ben?
So I guess this really comes back to the advisory article that the select board is going to put together for town meeting. I think we've figured out that everybody wants to protect the principal and use the income. We just don't know what to use the income for.
Well,
So
do
I
we
think-
want to use the income right away, or do we want to let it grow for a few years?
Well, that's up for debate, I guess.
Okay.
I think there's some, everybody has a,
Why
yes.
not leave
or
that
no.
up to the people at town meeting? That's
But-
what we have it for.
But, so I guess where we're left here is, I think also in that advisory article should be our purpose. You know, you're talking about putting a purpose there legally, it isn't required legally by the sounds. So, but to give some sort of direction for select boards in the future and for the townspeople in the future, I think we should put some sort of purpose within that advisory article. And if it is, if we can put it into capital reserve funds, then that should be outlined in the article. Whatever it is that we want to do should be outlined in that article, so everybody has direction in 2019 when we start looking at this money again, saying, what are we supposed to do with this money?
Right. Right, but the general feeling that I'm getting here tonight is that we really don't have a preference when it comes to a stated purpose for using the income.
Well, I have something I wouldn't like to see happen with it, is the disbursements go into the operating budget.
Okay?
That would be a misuse of those funds in my personal opinion.
To offset the budget.
Yeah, to put right into the operating budget as a line item for some department.
Say again, Aaron?
Could you put it up on the page?
Yeah, we have offset operating budget.
I have a question, Kyle Smith. By locking in the principal at town meeting, by not touching it, let's just say just use income, does that block your warrant article from accessing the principal?
In the future? No.
So even if you say lock the principal in, just use the income, you can still put a warrant article, bypass that?
The following year, you could come in with 25 signatures on a warrant article and spend the whole thing.
And it bypasses the locking in the principal at town meeting. You don't have to undo that.
We can only lock it in for the current year.
It's just an advisory article.
Well, that's what I was
for
thinking,
the
I wanted to
record.
clarify in my head, because I wasn't
Yep,
sure.
yep.
All right, so I think we're all in agreement, though, that we want the warrant article to say that we're going to, and we'll say this, like Ben says, it's advisory. Hopefully, future town meetings will listen to what we're saying. We want to leave the money in the account. And for how long? 3 years before we touch it?
Depends on the market.
5 years.
5? Oh, you're a lot of 5s. Okay. All right. So just as an example, we leave the money in the trust fund for at least 5 years to let it grow, and then in 5 years we'll do another hearing and see what people want to do with it. And again, that's not binding on the following year's town meeting. Anybody can come up with a warrant article. But is everybody comfortable with that wording for this first year? Anybody opposed to it? Norm?
No, we can get an accounting of how much is in there at any time.
Right.
Also, so if they need to know that.
Right. We'll always know what the amount is that's in the fund.
I would go so far as to, and I would be in agreement with that, me personally, but I would go so far as to continue with their recommendation thereafter the 5 years. Instead of rehashing this whole thing at that point, outline exactly, if it is, we want to leave it in there for 5 years, let it grow, and then we want to start accessing the interest on it, or the disbursements based on their plan, or their recommendation, I would put that in the article. It might be a long article, but I would put that in there.
Okay.
Yep, along with the purpose, if we can nail one down.
Okay, any other comments on Ben's suggestion? All right, then I think we know what we're gonna do. Norm, do you have anything else?
Yeah, also, the 23,000 grows.
Mhm.
So after 5 years, it may be, this is just my guess now, it may be around 30, so that goes up. The amount that would be paid in, 23,000, would increase and increase every year. So after 5 years, I wouldn't be paying out 23,000 anymore, it'd be closer to 30.
Right.
The principal would be substantially higher.
Yeah, and the principal stays.
Just as a library.
The principal also grows.
Yep, just like the library.
Yes.
The 4% disbursement isn't an example, that's what you're actually doing every year for the library, is that true? 4%?
We distribute 4%.
Okay.
But keep in mind that with the library, they actually rely on getting that income.
Right.
The operating budget covers salaries and building maintenance, but all the books, DVDs, and everything else they do programming-wise, except for the $2,000 that they get from the town in the operating budget, they rely on these trust funds to do all that.
Right.
So if the market tanked and 4% wasn't very much, not going to be a whole lot of new books this year.
Right, but the 4% remains firm year over year, even with the fluctuation in the fund.
It's a standard thing.
Okay, so I guess I would make the article even that much more specific as to exactly what you're recommending, to match the library investment strategy with the 4% disbursement after the 5 years.
Okay.
So there's no question as to what it is that we decided tonight or talked about tonight.
Or stated our intentions,
Exactly.
stated as our intentions
Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah. Intentions for the article to be voted on at town meeting.
Okay. Okay, any other comments or questions? There being no further business at this hearing, the hearing is concluded. Thank you all.